A billionaire widow found a black single dad kneeling at her husband's grave, and what he told her unraveled everything she thought she knew about the man she married. One hidden act of kindness, one impossible secret, one child who only lived because of it. If this story moves you, hit like right now. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And follow all the way to the end, because what these two discover together will change far more than just their own lives. The cemetery on the east side of Millfield was not a place most people chose to visit twice. It sat behind a rusted iron gate on the corner of Prater Avenue and 6th, squeezed between a car wash that had been closed for 3 years and a strip of overgrown grass the city kept promising to deal with. The graves were old on the west side, headstones tilting at angles that made them look tired, and newer on the east side, polished granite still holding its shine in the afternoon light. No fountains, no decorative benches, just flat ground, narrow gravel paths, and the kind of silence that did not feel peaceful so much as it felt heavy. Landon Hayes came here every month. He had been coming for 2 years. He always brought Milo because he had decided early on that his son should know, should understand, when he was old enough to carry it properly, exactly why they made this drive on the first Sunday of every month, parked the truck outside, and walked through that rusted gate, carrying whatever flowers were on sale at the grocery store. Not expensive flowers. Never expensive flowers. Landon had long since stopped being embarrassed about what he could and could not afford. Milo was 8 years old. He had his father's dark skin and his mother's stubborn chin, and he ran slightly ahead on the gravel path, sneakers crunching with each step. His small fist wrapped around today's flowers, white carnations with a few sprigs of eucalyptus that the woman at the register had tucked in for free because Milo had smiled at her. The grave was in the northeast corner, set apart from the others by a small ornamental hedge that someone kept trimmed. The headstone was dark gray granite, simple but clearly expensive, with clean carved letters that had not faded the way the older ones had. Marcus Sterling, 1979 to 2022. Husband, builder, dreamer. Milo crouched and placed the carnations against the base of the stone. The boy was quiet for a moment. He did this every time, this small, serious pause, and Landon never rushed him through it. "Hi," he said. "It's us again." He said it the way you would say it to a neighbor you had known your whole life. Easy, comfortable, no self-consciousness about it at all. "I got 100 on my math test. Dad said I could get pizza, but I wanted burritos, so we got burritos. Dad had 2, which is why he's not allowed to say anything about my second helping anymore. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened." Landon crouched beside his son, looked at the headstone for a long moment, and said quietly, "We're okay, both of us, thanks to you." That was the whole ritual, maybe 10 minutes. Then they would walk back to the truck, and the afternoon would go on the way afternoons did. Normal, unremarkable, exactly the kind of afternoon that Landon 2.5 years ago had been terrified his son would never see. He wore a watch on his left wrist that did not belong on the wrist of a man in his position. Not with a 3-year-old truck, with a cracked dashboard and a studio apartment, where the elevator worked about 60% of the time. Slim silver face, dark leather band, understated but clearly well made. On the back, 3 initials in a small serif font, M.A.S. Marcus Allen Sterling. He was standing up, brushing gravel dust from his knee, when he heard the footsteps behind him, not on the gravel path, off to the side, on the grass, moving quickly. He turned. The woman was maybe 30. She was dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal blazer that looked like it had not been bought at any store Landon had ever walked into. Her hair was pulled back, dark and precise, and her face was the kind that had spent years learning how to show very little of what was happening underneath it. She walked with the particular confidence of someone who was almost never told no. She stopped about 6 feet away. Her eyes went from the headstone to Milo to Landon, and then something happened that Landon recognized instantly because he had been recognizing it his entire life. Her gaze caught on his skin first, the quick involuntary assessment, the recalibration, the set of assumptions that landed before a single word was spoken. He saw it happen in the space between one breath and the next. Then her eyes dropped to his left wrist, and the watch, and her jaw tightened. "Why is that watch on your wrist?" she said. "Not who are you? Not what are you doing here? The watch." As if a man who looked like him could not have come by it honestly. The question carried a weight beneath it that had nothing to do with jewelry, and Landon felt the familiar quiet settling in his chest, the disciplined cousin of anger, the thing he had learned to hold still inside himself, because reacting to it had never once made it better. "My name is Landon Hayes," he said evenly. "This is my son, Milo. Why are you at this grave? We come every month." Something shifted in her expression. "Every month," she repeated, and the way she said it carried two layers: disbelief that it was true, and something beneath the disbelief that sounded almost like the beginning of not wanting it to be what she had first assumed. Her voice had started in one register, the cold, controlled register of a woman confronting a threat, and it was shifting, involuntarily, towards something else. "It was given to me," Landon said. "The watch, given to you." Her voice was flat. "That watch belonged to my husband." The air between them changed. "You're Vivian Sterling," he said. "Yes." She took one step closer. "And I want to know why a man I have never seen before in my life is standing at my husband's grave with his watch on his wrist." She said it quietly. That was almost worse than if she had raised her voice. There was a restraint to it that made clear she was holding something back, and what she was holding back was not small. Landon reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I made a copy of this. I still have the original at home." He held it out. She did not reach for it immediately. She looked at it. Then she reached out and took it. The handwriting was confident and slightly cramped, the kind of handwriting that moved fast. Vivian stared at it. Her face went completely still. "You don't know me, and that's all right. I heard about your boy through a friend of a friend who works at the hospital. I know this doesn't fix everything, but I hope it gives him a chance. Take good care of him. That's the only repayment I want. M." The paper shook slightly in her hand. She stopped it from shaking. "I recognize the handwriting," she said. "It's his. It's definitely his." She looked up. "But I've never seen this note before. I didn't know about a donation. I didn't know about your son." She looked at Landon directly, and for the first time the composure cracked just slightly at the edges. "My husband never told me any of this." Landon had known, in the abstract, that this moment might eventually come. He had spent 2 years visiting this grave without running into anyone, and he had started to think, in the way people think about things they are not ready to face, that it might just stay that way forever. He had been wrong. He glanced toward the bench near the gate, then back at Vivian. 2.5 years ago, he said, "My son was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. His heart wall was thickening. He was 6 years old. His cardiologist told me that if he didn't have surgery within 8 to 10 months, the odds shifted in the wrong direction, very fast." He paused. "I was working 2 jobs. I had insurance, but not the kind that covered what he needed. The gap was close to $100,000. Not closable. Not by me. Not in that amount of time. I applied everywhere. Every assistance program, every grant, every foundation I could find. Most had waiting lists. The ones that didn't had criteria I didn't meet, or they covered a different procedure, or they had exhausted their funding for the year." He stopped. "I'm not telling you that to make it sound dramatic. I'm telling you because I need you to understand what it meant when the hospital called me." "What hospital?" "Millfield General. The cardiac wing. The billing office called and said an anonymous donor had covered the full cost of Milo's surgery. Pre-op, the procedure, post-op, 3 nights in the ICU, follow-up appointments. All of it. $140,000. I didn't know who it was, so I said thank you, and I took my son to surgery, and I sat in a waiting room for 9 hours, and when they told me it went well, I cried in a hospital bathroom for about 15 minutes, and then I went and held my son's hand." The watch came a week later. No return address. Just the watch and the note card. He had looked up the initials. Found the name. Found the obituary. Found the grave. Vivian looked at the headstone, then at Landon. "I want to see the scar," she said. Milo was sitting on the bench near the gate, exactly where Landon had sent him. Is it all right if I show this woman your scar? Landon asked. Milo studied her the way he studied math problems. Why does she want to see it? Because she needs to believe something I told her. Milo looked at the woman. It's from my heart surgery, he told her. I was 6. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just looks weird. Vivian crouched down to his eye level. Something happened in her face. A small, involuntary softening. What's your favorite subject in school? She asked. Math, he said. And lunch. A sound came out of Vivian that was very close to a laugh, but did not quite make it. Fair enough, she said. Milo pulled his shirt up to just below his collarbone, revealing the scar, pale and slightly raised against his dark skin, running vertically for several inches. Vivian looked at it for a long time, long enough that Milo glanced at his father with an expression that asked whether this was normal. Then she stood back up. The suspicion that had been in her face at the gravestone was gone. Something else had taken its place. I want you to come to my house, she said. There are things there. Journals, personal records. I think you might need to see some of them. The drive to the Sterling house took 22 minutes. Milo spent it with his forehead against the truck window, watching the neighborhoods change as they moved from the east side through the middle of the city and out toward the reservoir, where the houses started getting larger and the spaces between them started growing. The Sterling house was a large gray stone structure, set back from the road behind a long driveway lined with young trees. The kind of house that said money the way a whisper says something, quietly, so that you had to lean in to hear it. There was a housekeeper inside, who nodded at Vivian with practiced neutrality. She led them into a sitting room furnished in gray and navy that felt both elegant and oddly impersonal. Sit wherever you like, Vivian said to Milo. There should be juice in the kitchen. Milo sat on the edge of a gray couch. Is this your house? It is. It's very clean. Milo, Landon said. It's a compliment, Milo said. Vivian looked at the boy. Thank you, she said, and she sounded like she meant it. She turned to Landon. The study is upstairs. The study was the kind of room that told you something about a person the moment you walked in, not in a curated way. It was a room that had been used. The desk was large and wooden and covered in the particular disorganization of someone who knew exactly where everything was. A bookshelf held business texts and paperback novels with cracked spines. A cardboard box in the corner still had packing tape on it. On the windowsill, a small succulent in a terracotta pot had died and dried out. Nobody had touched this room in a while. It still smelled like him. The aftershave, or whatever it had been. Vivian had been running from that smell for 18 months. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Landon stood behind her, and he understood that they were both giving her a second. Then she walked in. There was a set of shelves to the left, holding a row of identical dark green journals, each labeled on the spine with a year in Marcus Sterling's cramped handwriting. She ran one finger along the spines, reading the years. She pulled out the one labeled with the year Milo had his surgery. She sat in the desk chair and opened it. Landon sat in the smaller chair against the wall, the one that was probably meant for guests. The desk had a small framed photograph pushed to one side. A younger Vivian, her hair longer, standing beside a man with an easy smile and a slight heaviness around the eyes. They were standing somewhere coastal. She was laughing at something. He was watching her laugh. Landon looked away from the photograph. The entry was dated 13 months before Milo's surgery. It was about a 4-year-old in Ohio who needed a bone marrow procedure. The family's crowdfunding campaign had barely reached 10%. The entry ended with, "Sent something through the usual account. Not enough. Probably. Never feels like enough. Didn't leave my name. Easier that way, for them and for me." She turned several pages. A 7-year-old in Millfield, burns from a house fire, family uninsured. The entry noted the hospital, the name of a contact Marcus had cultivated there, and at the bottom, made sure it was handled. They won't know it was me. That's fine. She kept turning pages. Each one revealed another child, another family, another quiet intervention her husband had conducted, without telling her, without telling anyone, with the meticulous record-keeping of a man who treated generosity the way he treated everything else, seriously, systematically, and in private. How long does it go back? Landon asked. Vivian looked at the shelf. 8 years. 8 years of journals. 8 years she had lived in the same house and not known. She put the journal down and pressed both hands flat on the desk. I didn't know, she said. I thought I knew him. Between the donation entries, scattered like small confessions written late at night, were fragments that had nothing to do with finances. V was in Berlin this week. The house feels wrong when it's empty. Tried to bring up the counseling thing again. She shut it down. I don't know how to keep trying without feeling like I'm pushing someone who doesn't want to be pushed. Maybe she's right. Maybe we're past the point where talking would do anything. We had dinner together tonight. First time in 2 weeks we both sat down at the same table. It was fine. It was civil. I hate that fine. And civil is what we're at. I remember when we weren't. Vivian read these and sat with them. She had known the marriage was struggling, not in a conversation they had had, because those conversations had become too hard, too loaded. Both of them too exhausted, and too proud, and too afraid of what the honest answers might be. But in the ambient, wordless way you know things, you have been refusing to look at directly. She had buried herself in work. He had apparently buried himself in the quiet project of trying to fix other people's irreparable situations when he could not fix his own. She did not know whether to be angry at him for it. She decided she was not angry. She was sad, which was different and somehow harder. She pulled the final journal from the shelf. The last entry was dated the day before Marcus Sterling's fatal accident. His handwriting was messier than usual. He had noted the time, 11:47 at night. I've been thinking about the Hargrove kid for a month now. Not specifically him, but what he represents. There are too many of them. One at a time isn't enough. It's never going to be enough doing it this way. I want to build something, a real structure. Something that actually reaches the families who are falling through every gap there is. And Vivian, if I can explain it right, if I can actually sit down and talk to her about it the way I used to be able to talk to her, I'm going to ask her tomorrow. Actually ask her. I've been circling around it for months because I was afraid she'd think it was foolish or small. But I don't think she'd think that. I think I've just been afraid of sitting across from her and being real about something for the first time in a long time. She's asleep right now. I can hear her from the hallway. Tomorrow I'm going to drive home from the site visit and sit down and actually talk to her. If she says no, she says no, but I think she might say yes. He never came home from the site visit. A truck ran a light. January evening. No warning. He had left for the site visit in the morning, and Vivian had been in a meeting when her assistant came in and told her. She did not cry for 3 days. She did not cry at the funeral. She was so far into shock that it took 3 days before it started feeling real. Vivian closed the journal. She did not cry now either. She did the thing that happens before crying, when the body understands something the mind is still catching up to. I would have said yes, she said quietly. To no one in particular, to the room that still smelled like him. She called on Monday morning at 8:47. Landon was in the truck, 10 minutes from the freight office. Coffee in the cup holder going cold the way it always did. I went through all of them, she said. All 8 journals. I finished around 4 this morning. How are you doing? A pause. I've been better. I've also been worse. I'm somewhere in the middle. I want to move forward with the foundation, she said. But before I get into any of that, I need to talk to you about what you actually know from your side of it. You were the person in the waiting room. You were the person filling out the applications that went nowhere. You were inside the system in a way I've never been. They met that evening at the Sterling house. Vivian had organized the study. The journals were stacked in order, a legal pad open beside them. I want to understand the gap, she said, uncapping a pen. When your son was diagnosed, walk me through the financial side. Landon folded his hands on the desk. The surgery he needed was a septal myectomy. Total cost, a little under $140,000. My insurance covered roughly $42,000. That left close to $100,000. With a 6-year-old and a logistics coordinator salary. What did you try? Everything I could find. He said it without drama. One foundation covered cardiac procedures, but only for children under 5. Milo was 6. One covered septal myectomies, but only in 3 specific states: We weren't in any of them. One had an application that required a letter of medical necessity, 2 years of tax returns, written statements from 2 physicians, and proof of insurance denial. Their next review cycle was in 8 months. 8 months was the outside of the window my son had. Vivian stopped writing. So the system isn't non-existent. It's misaligned. That's one way to say it. There's money. There are people who want to help. But the structure is designed around what's comfortable for the organizations, not around what families actually need. He stopped. He looked at his hands for a moment, then at Vivian. There's something else I haven't told you. Another layer. She waited. When I went to one of those foundations in person to submit an application, the intake coordinator looked at me. He said it carefully. The way you say things you have said before in your head but never out loud. Black man. Faded jeans. Calloused hands from dock work. She asked if I was sure I was in the right place. Then she suggested I try the Medicaid program first. I didn't qualify for Medicaid. I told her that. She suggested it again. Slower. The second time. The way you talk to someone you've decided doesn't understand the words you're using. The room was very quiet. The system isn't just slow, Landon said. For people who look like me, it sometimes decides you don't belong in it before you've finished explaining why you're there. Vivian picked up her pen and wrote his exact words on the legal pad. She did not paraphrase. She did not soften them. She wrote them down the way he said them. That sentence, she said, that's going into the intake design criteria, not as a quote. As a principle, the process has to work for the person who walks in with calloused hands and faded jeans, and no one in the room who looks like them. If it doesn't work for that person, it doesn't work. Landon looked at her. It was the first time someone on the other side of the desk had heard what he was actually saying and responded not with sympathy, but with architecture. Not with "I'm sorry that happened to you," but with "how do we make sure it doesn't happen to the next person?" 3 days later, Vivian met with Sonia Rayburn, Marcus's contact at Millfield General, a small, compact woman in her early 60s, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the directness of someone who had spent decades watching people find or fail to find help in the worst moments of their lives. Vivian showed her the journals. Sonia's face moved through recognition and then something beyond it, a grief she had been carrying privately. He called me every few months for 6 years, Sonia said. I would flag cases. He'd make the call about whether to fund. He never wanted to know the families personally. He just wanted to know they were okay after. Then Sonia said the thing that changed the pace of everything. There's a case right now. I've been sitting on it for 3 weeks because there was nothing I could do with it. 7-year-old girl, Wilms tumor, kidney cancer. Specialized surgical approach at a center in Boston. $160,000. Parents both working. Combined income just above the Medicaid threshold. Insurance covering about 50%. 6 weeks before the surgical window closed, the foundation did not legally exist yet. Vivian did not hesitate. Send me the anonymized case file, she said. Today, she called Landon that evening. I'm going to fund it myself, but I need your help with the family communication. I know how to write checks. I don't know how to tell a parent their kid's surgery is covered without making it feel like pity. Don't soften the thing they already know, Landon said. They've been living inside it. If you skip the form and just throw the life jacket, people can actually breathe again. She paused. Would you come with me? The Okafor family was in the small consultation room on the 4th floor at Millfield General. Renee Okafor was 34, a dental hygienist who had not slept a full night in 3 weeks. Her husband, Daniel, was 36, a high school history teacher with a quiet, deliberate way of speaking. Vivian explained the fund. Plain language, no mission statement phrasing, the kind that covers surgical costs for children in situations like yours. No conditions, no loan structure. Daniel Okafor looked at Landon. There was a moment between them that did not require words, the particular silent communication between 2 black men, in a room where the power sat on the other side of the table, with the white woman who held the checkbook. Daniel had learned, through a lifetime, what it meant when someone who looked like Vivian offered something to someone who looked like him. Is there a catch? Daniel said. Because in my experience, When someone who looks like her offers something to someone who looks like us, there's always a line somewhere. Landon held his gaze. There's no line, he said. I looked for one. It's not there. Daniel studied him. Then he looked at his wife. Renee was looking at the table. What does it mean for Amara if this fund covers the surgery? She asked without looking up. It means the Boston Center gets confirmed funding this week, Vivian said. It means the 6-week window is no longer the thing you're working against. Renee put both hands flat on the table. Daniel reached across and put his arm around her, and she leaned into him, and the two of them sat there in the particular way of people who have been strong in front of each other for so long that a small loosening of the tension becomes overwhelming. The Next Chance Foundation filed its nonprofit paperwork 4 weeks later. In those 4 weeks, Vivian had assembled a 5-person board that included her estate lawyer, a pediatric oncologist from Millfield General, referred by Sonia Rayburn, a child welfare advocate she had met through a professional contact, and 2 people she had interviewed specifically for their knowledge of how charitable organizations failed because she was far more interested in failure modes than success stories when it came to building something meant to last. She hired a part-time operations coordinator named Priya, who had previously managed intake for a legal aid nonprofit and understood the difference between a process that worked on paper and one that worked under pressure. Landon reviewed the intake criteria document 3 times, marking it up with notes from his memory of what the applications had actually asked versus what had mattered. He flagged 4 places where the language was bureaucratically clean but practically burdensome. Vivian revised them. He flagged 2 more. She revised them again. On the 3rd pass, he handed the document back. The document is good. She looked at him. Are you sure? You've been very thorough about telling me when something is wrong. I want to make sure you're not softening it because you think I've heard enough. I'm not softening anything. He paused. The family communications section still sounds like it was written by someone who learned English from grant applications. She looked at the relevant section. What would you change? All of it. He took the document and rewrote 2 paragraphs in his own language. Plain, direct, the way he would have wanted someone to speak to him in a hospital waiting room. She read them and was quiet for a moment. This is better, she said. I know. I'm not sure whether you're easy to work with or difficult, she said. I'm consistent, he said, which is different from both. She looked at him in the particular way she had developed over the past several weeks, assessing but without the suspicion that had been in it the first day at the cemetery, more like she was still calibrating something and not quite finished. Would you be willing to work on this with me? She said. The directness of it was very her. No build-up, no softening. In what capacity? You understand the family side of this in a way I don't and never will. I can build the financial architecture. What I can't do is sit across from a family in crisis and know what they actually need versus what looks good on a program description. I have a full-time job, he said. I'm not asking you to quit it. I'm asking you to advise, compensated. I'm not doing it for compensation. I'm paying you anyway, because I'm not building something on goodwill. That's how foundations fall apart. He saw quickly that she was right. All right, he said. When Vivian proposed that Landon attend the press event, one of the board members, a white man in his 60s, well-intentioned but operating on assumptions he had never examined, suggested that having a beneficiary family present could be powerful for the narrative. He said the word narrative the way people say it when they mean marketing. Vivian cut him off. Landon is not a narrative device. He's an advisor. The room went quiet. Landon looked at Vivian across the table, and he recognized something he had not expected to see from her. She had placed herself between him and the particular gaze he had spent his life learning to absorb. It was the first time she had done it deliberately, and he understood that she had been paying attention. The press event was held at a hotel conference room downtown, medium-sized. Nothing flashy. Vivian had been adamant about this. No gala, no dinner, no black tie, anything. A conference table, some chairs, a brief statement, and a question-and-answer session. The kind of event that said this is a working organization, not a brand launch. Vivian stood at the front, composed in the way she was always composed in public, and told the story the way they had agreed. Marcus's years of private work. The gap in the system he had identified. The foundation as the formal extension of what he had been doing quietly for 8 years. She did not mention Milo. She did not mention Landon. She mentioned Sonia Rayburn by name, with Sonia's permission, and Sonia, sitting in the third row, pressed her lips together in the way of someone trying not to cry in public and managing it by about 60%. A reporter from the health desk asked about intake criteria. Vivian explained them clearly in under 90 seconds. A freelance reporter asked a different kind of question. Why this? You run a successful company. Plenty of people lose a spouse and find ways to honor their memory. Why not just write a check to an existing organization? Vivian looked at the reporter. Because the existing organizations weren't fast enough, she said, and because my husband spent 8 years trying to compensate for that with his own money, one child at a time, without telling anyone, and he had an idea for something better, and he didn't get to build it. She paused. The families who need it in 6 weeks can't wait for me to finish grieving first. The room stayed quiet for a second. Then the moderator moved to the next question. Landon stood at the back of the room with a cup of coffee. He was not a speaker. He was not on the program. He was just there, the way Vivian had asked him to be. There was a woman 2 rows ahead of him, who had been sitting very still through the entire event. When Vivian said those last words, the woman exhaled slowly and looked at her lap. Landon watched her for a moment. He recognized the posture, the tiredness in it. He walked forward and sat in the empty seat beside her. "Are you okay?" he said quietly. She looked at him. She was a black woman, maybe 35, with tired eyes and hands that she kept clasping and unclasping in her lap. "Do you have a child who needs help?" he said. She was quiet for a moment. "My daughter. Cardiac condition. We're still in the diagnostic phase, but the cardiologist said it could require a specialist, and we're not." She stopped. After the event, Landon said, "Come talk to me. Not to a form. To me. We'll figure out what the situation looks like and what we can do." She looked at him. He thought about the person who had sat where she was sitting right now, in a different room, in a different year. A man with calloused dock worker hands filling out applications at midnight. He thought about what it would have meant if someone had said those exact words to him. She looked at him with the particular vulnerability of a person being asked to believe they can put something down. "I didn't think this was for people like us," she said quietly. Landon held her gaze. "It's for everyone," he said. "But I'm here to make sure everyone actually means everyone." He handed her one of the cards Priya had made. Plain white, the foundation name, a phone number, an email. She took it with both hands. He watched her hold it the way someone holds something they're not yet sure is real but desperately want to be. Spring arrived in the particular way Millfield Springs arrived. One warm week, followed by a cold snap and then warmth again. The trees making a second attempt at green. The cemetery on the corner of Prater Avenue and 6th got its annual cleanup, and the rusted iron gate got a coat of black paint that made it look, for a few weeks at least, like something that had been tended to. On the first Sunday of April, Landon pulled the truck into its usual spot. Milo was already unbuckling before the engine was off, but this time when he climbed out, there was a third door opening. Vivian stepped out of the passenger side, carrying flowers, not carnations. She had asked Milo the night before what they usually brought, and he had told her, and then studied her for a moment and said she could pick something else if she wanted, that the man in the grave wouldn't mind. She had chosen white tulips. They walked through the gate together. Milo ran slightly ahead because he always did. Landon walked in the middle, and Vivian beside him. Close, but not touching, because they were still learning the choreography of this. The northeast corner. The dark gray granite. Marcus Sterling, 1979 to 2022. Husband, builder, dreamer. Milo crouched and placed his carnations against the base of the stone. "Hi," he said. "It's us again, except there's 3 of us now." Then he looked up at Vivian. "You can put them down. There's room." She stepped forward and crouched beside him and placed the tulips next to the carnations. "I read everything," she said quietly. All 8 years. I know what you were going to ask me. She paused. I would have said yes. So the foundation is doing well, Milo informed the grave. I know because I hear about it a lot. Dad talks about it at dinner, which used to be when I could talk about whatever I wanted. But now I have to wait for a gap. He glanced at his father. I'm not complaining. We helped 39 kids. Also, Vivian is pretty good at chess. I've beaten her 6 times, but she's beaten me 11, so I'm still working on it. And Dad is doing okay. He's better than he was. He used to have this look sometimes, like he was carrying something really heavy and didn't want anyone to notice. He doesn't have that look as much anymore. Landon thought about something Milo had said months ago, driving away from the Sterling house for the first time. It would be a waste to find all that out and just be sad about it. 8 years old, and already understanding the thing that took most adults a lifetime to get to, which was that grief was not a destination. It was a passage, and what mattered was what you built on the other side. He looked at Vivian. Her expression was not the carefully managed composure she wore when she needed to hold something at arm's length. It was the face of someone who had set something down, not put it away, not stopped caring, just stopped holding it up by sheer will. Something that looked, imperfectly and incompletely, like peace. Landon sat at his kitchen table in the studio apartment on the east side of Millfield. Milo was eating cereal across from him. His phone buzzed. A message from Vivian. Board approved the Year 2 expansion, 2 additional counties. Are you free Thursday? He wrote back. Thursday, yes. But close the laptop at 9. A pause. I'll try. Try harder. Fine. He smiled at his phone, put it face down on the table, picked up his coffee, which was predictably cold. He understood, with the full weight of everything that had led him here, that gratitude this size was not a feeling you held. It was a thing you did, every day, for as long as you were able. That was all. That was enough.